Hi, everyone. So hopefully my audio is okay. I know my video is blurry, but Lynn will join us in a moment and she'll be sharing photos. So you won't be seeing too much of my blurry image. I am on my way to a clinic in the California wine country. So I have pulled over at a state park to get Wi-Fi and hopefully it'll all be successful. Hi, Lynn.
Hello.
Your audio sounds great. Hopefully mine is
Oh,
holding.
good.
Um, this
Sounds
week.
clear to me.
Oh, great, great. This week the topic is so meaty and rich, so I'll keep the intro short. But it's a topic I did a podcast recording on several episodes ago, but it was just on examining and asking ourselves whether the process of grooming our horse or bathing our horse or clipping and all that kind of stuff is as relaxing and enjoyable for them as we might assume it is. And I think this is one of these things that Lynn and I talk about a lot. It's just such an individual case by case thing. I know a lot of horses that love, I perceive that they love to be groomed, but I've also known others that I think it's a little bit of an agitating experience. And maybe that's because there's a lot of triggers in the way that we go about our grooming sometimes, the location, the scenario, and the isolation, there's just a lot of pieces. And I think, Lynn, you're going to help clarify some of that for us. So that's why I named this like brushing, bathing, and bonding. Are we bonding? Or are we creating stress? So where do you start off when you think about this topic, Lynn?
Well, exactly what you said. It could be bonding or it could be a source of stress. If we think about bonding, that's the core emotion care. And it's related to nurturing and social bonds and protection and touch. To us, usually touching a horse feels good. If it didn't feel good to touch a horse, we probably wouldn't be doing what we do. So we like to assume that horses are having the same sort of feeling that this is reciprocal, that it feels good to them to have us touch. So how about if we start screen sharing and I'll show you a picture of a little bonding in progress here.
That sounds great. You should be enabled to do that.
Okay. Let's see if this comes up on schedule.
I think it's happening. Okay, yes.
Okay, we have a picture here.
That is
Do
so
you,
cute. Oh, that's cute. Yes.
yeah. So we have here Dartmoor filly Abby, who has just come to her new home, and Yogi the Dalmatian, who's been living there and loves horses. So Yogi is showing where bonding starts for them. He's standing very quietly. His eyes are even closed, and he's allowing Abby to take the the first move of coming over and nuzzling him, sniffing him, checking him out. And then having shown each other that they're safe here, we go to the next step. And now Abby stands and allows Yogi to come over and touch her. He's actually licking her little nose. So what we have here is, as you can see, the comfort with each other. And this is the whole thing. If it's going to be bonding, it has to be mutual. So if we're the only ones who are feeling good about it, the horses are not going to enjoy being groomed.
I think one of
And
the
then we're the
Oh, can I interrupt? The first picture that was so
sure.
cool, that first image, and I love how it evolved to the second image. The the dog and the horse aren't really head on, so it's not like how the way we commonly like go right up to their face or like get engaged with their muzzle or their forelock or whatever. I think what's cool about that first picture you showed is that there's this mutual, let's kind of check each other out a little bit sideways situation going on, which is pretty neat. And then it evolves to, okay, let me present my face, and yes, this does seem super mutual. So
Yes, and that's a really good point about the way that we approach and first engage a horse. And then where this went is now hanging out together, not necessarily touching, but that's another part of bonding. It's just the hanging out together. And then when you really get to know each other, here's Shay and Nicole. Shay has known Nicole since the day she was born. They know each other well. And so part of their bond is Shay knows she can back her little butt up to Nicole, and Nicole knows that means please scratch my butt. So it's not, we've moved now beyond where we need the touch to be very gentle to we know each other and we can have a more vigorous grooming like horses might do with each other. So when this is kind of the people's view of grooming. Ron's is all mellow here. He's pulled his ears back so that I can brush his forehead. He's looking nice and relaxed. And so I think this is kind of the people view of grooming, is it's mutually stress reducing. Yep. This is more the view that horses often end up with. They can be really uncomfortable with it because their space is invaded. They've got the restrictions of being tied pretty often. They may not like the equipment or the technique that you use. They may feel they're not being listened to. And so the question, how common are there issues with grooming? A study showed that this study had a group of people or a number of people groom their horses, and they were videos so that the videos could be analyzed later. And of those horse and rider groups where the people were grooming their horses, 5% of the horses showed that they were comfortable with grooming, that they were enjoying it by things like seeking more closeness or trying to mutual groom back. 50% of the horses actually showed pain or aggression, which shows the extent to which people often tune out what the horse is doing and what the horse is feeling. And it was to the point where it was actually dangerous, that several people narrowly missed being injured.
And by grooming in this study, they meant like the traditional brushing, mane combing, that sort of thing, Lynn?
Yes. Yeah, it was basically what we typically do before saddling up to ride. And so the follow-up study changed one thing and one thing only. They asked the riders to watch the horse's body language and respond according to the horse's body language. So this is my daughter, Sarah, grooming our Shiloh. And Shiloh's saying, I'm not happy about what you're doing. The ears are back. She's kind of glaring at her. She's getting ready to paw. So Sarah, but you see Sarah's watching Shiloh's face and noticing this.
Yeah.
And what happened to my
Oh, yeah.
So we move on here to Sarah has made one change. You see Shiloh's face is calmer. And she's not turning around saying, stop this. The only change she's made is that she's using the curry in a different way. Some horses like the curry used. Some horses prefer having the curry used back and forth. Some want it to go in circles. Some just want it to go in the direction of their hair. Some want it used firmly or gently. It's very individual. So if we're not watching the horse and we just have our own sort of set technique, odds are we can make a horse pretty unhappy. So Sarah's changed one thing, how she uses this curry, and now Shiloh's a lot happier.
Well, I think that's a really simple but important point, Lynn, because I think sometimes we assume that grooming, like brushing, like what your daughter's doing there, is partly to, help the horse relax or whatever, but it's also to get them clean. Whereas we tend to think about other ways of touching the horse as just that, ways of touching the horse. But really, grooming is a way of touching the horse. And I think sometimes we need to just let go of this idea that I'm going to get you clean, because certainly everybody wants to be clean. That's the best thing for everybody, right? Is to be spotless and get all this dust off you. I think sometimes we need to remind ourselves, this is a way, it's just like body work or energy work, or, Linda Tellington Jones had all those different ways of instructing people how to touch the horse, different pressures, different strokes for different horses. And I think that it's simple, but really worth remembering. We're not just trying to get the horse clean.
Right. Yeah. Of course, horses, as we know, don't usually care if they're clean anyway. But uh, yeah, it's if we just think of it as clean, then it becomes a very mechanical thing. We might get distracted chatting with somebody or thinking about something else. If we think of it as bonding, then we want to be looking at the horse and or paying attention, tuning into the horse. And the very first step of this is, how do we go into the horse's space? Because if we think about it, grooming is very much an invasion of personal space. And just as people aren't necessarily comfortable with just anybody in their personal space, neither are horses. So that's the first step. And step one is, if you don't know the horse, introduce yourself. This is my granddaughter introducing herself to Bronze, the traditional horse handshake. And if you extend your hand to a horse and he doesn't come up and touch it, you might wonder if he really wants you in his space. And then you have an issue you need to deal with before you can even think about grooming the horse, because if he's not comfortable with you in his space, he's certainly not going to be happy about having you touching him.
Yeah, absolutely. They may not have gone into it in that study that you referenced, Lynn, but I was curious when they studied the positive or negative effect for horses in grooming, the study that you mentioned, was that were they always grooming the horse before riding? Was the sequence the same? Do you know? Because I've often wondered if horses' attitudes towards grooming might change if we focused on it more after we ride. Or maybe you're going to cover this in a second here.
No, that's a really good point, Jack. And I think if we look at it again from the emotional point of view, emotions relate to what happens afterwards. So if a horse is not comfortable being ridden or not comfortable with any aspect of riding, then the grooming is seen as the anticipation to riding, and they will naturally be less comfortable with grooming because it's like, okay, now we're leading up to riding, and this isn't going to be comfortable, so they're going to already be tense. It's a saying that ethologists have emotions infect backwards. So what whatever is going to be coming next is going to impact the current situation. So and then that can infect backwards too. I can't catch the horse. Well, that's because he doesn't want to be groomed because he doesn't want to be ridden.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, so
So
okay, yeah, tell us about this picture. Now it looks like we've moved on to a whole different kind of touch here.
well, yes, if you have a horse who's getting tense, well, let me back up to the personal space thing. The first step when you're working with a new horse, a horse who's tense or anxious, is make sure that he's comfortable with you in his space, and then check where is he comfortable being touched, and uh, don't focus on I have to be able to touch his ears, I have to be able to touch his belly, I have to be able to touch. Focus first on this is where he likes being touched. He likes belly scratches. He likes wither scratches or shoulder scratches. In this case, Sarah's doing a little massage on Shiloh's neck. And as you can see from Shiloh's expression, she's finding this quite relaxing. So if a horse gets tense while you're grooming, a good step is figure out what they enjoy, whether it's a scratching on a certain spot or a neck massage or a massage someplace else, and find a way to help them get relaxed.
I love that. I love that you have two horses tied in the barn together too, because I think
Oh,
some of the stressors you'll probably get here in a second, but we take a horse out of its herd or stable buddies and we tie them somewhere else. We restrain them somewhere else to do the said grooming, which sometimes can be not as pleasant for them. But we're like, no, when we're in the wash stall, or this is where the grooming happens, and this is a wonderful thing.
right. And that issue of restraint really can be huge, for a couple of reasons. Sometimes horses aren't prepared for being restrained by ties, or especially by cross ties. Um, they and they also then don't have the same freedom to tell us how they're feeling about something. So here's Bronze. I'm grooming him loose in his stall this time. And he's reaching around to say to me that, that brush you used on my face, it felt so good. I don't like when you use that on my belly. I don't know why, but he loves that brush on his face. If I use it on his belly, he gets grouchy.
Hmm.
So even different parts of the body might require different. Tell me this. So the more a horse is restrained, the more carefully we need to watch their body language, whether they're comfortable with what we're doing and whether we need to adjust. The ultimate test is here. Bronze happened to be outside sunning himself. I wanted to go for a ride. I said, well, why take him inside out of the nice sunshine to groom? I'll just groom him out here. So I popped his halter on over his fly mask, started grooming. And then I said, oh, what the heck? I left his curry sitting on his rump and stepped back to take a picture. But the point here is that, of course, you're not supposed to leave grooming equipment sitting on top of the horse in case it falls off and spooks them. But this comes under the heading, I think, of I know my horse. And she's had curries fall off his rump before. But the point here is that he's not tied. I just dropped his lead on the ground. If he wasn't happy with our grooming session, he's totally free to walk away and inform me, Lynn, I'm not into this. So it's my job to make it comfortable enough for him that he's happy to stand there and be groomed.
Yeah, and I just think
So
that
before we tie,
I just think that so often that is all a lot of horses need is the ability to move their feet a little bit, not to like run away from you, but just to move their feet a little bit and not feel restrained. Many horses need that for comfort, not just the young ones. And when we groom them, I'm not saying tie them so the lead rope is a mile high, but maybe your grooming for a month or so might entail the way that Bronze is standing there ground tied. It might be just that because some horses just need to know they can shuffle around and feel safe. Um, yeah, I think what we do to show horses when we're getting them ready and we're spraying products on them and putting braids in their mane and we're like holding them on the spot so we're not getting all these grooming products all over the ground and our clothes and stuff. And I think, God, that's so stressful. And then we're going to get on and ride them and expect them to do really well. Anyway, so many instances we can all do better. So anyway, carry on.
oh, well, but to your point, then before a horse is tied, he needs to know how to yield to pressure so that he's not going to get anxious or even panicky from the restraint of being tied. So this is kind of separate from grooming, but sort of a prerequisite if you want to tie him for grooming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then if you want to cross tie, I think a lot of people take this lightly and they pop horses into cross ties and the horse is dancing around because he's restrained. He's not accustomed to not being able to turn his head around. He can't see what's happening behind him. And if it's a busy barn, all kinds of stuff could be happening behind him. And it's natural for them to want to know what's happening and to be able to turn around and check things out. So that can be a really, really tense situation for a horse to be. Excuse me, I need to not let my cat sit on my computer and kick me off. So
She wants a little grooming herself.
yeah. So so there a lot of preparation needs to happen before a horse can be cross-tied. And what we want when a horse is cross-tied then is we want this. I see this is Moore. He's a Dartmoor pony. And as you see, he's already got some braids. So he's been standing there for a while and he's quite comfortable with this. He's very comfortable in cross ties. And one of the reasons that his owner has worked with him to be comfortable in cross ties is that his job is driving. And I used to be very anti-cross ties because I couldn't see how a horse could be comfortable in them. And his owner, Melody, pointed out to me that a driving horse has to be comfortable standing straight and being restrained at the same time, because once you have the harness on, they've got the blinders, they can't look around, they can't turn around because of the shafts. And if they get fidgety while they're hooked to a carriage, you can have a pretty dangerous mess. And
Yeah.
so this is a thriving pony named Bottle Rocket. And as you see, she's standing there completely unrestrained now, but that didn't happen by putting her in cross ties and saying, okay, you're going to stand here until you get done dancing around. It starts with comfort. And Moore's owner made a very clear point that you don't put a horse in cross ties and do something unpleasant. As you were just talking about, you don't come up to him with fly spray or clippers unless he's totally cool with those already. You work those things out outside of the cross ties. So in order for a horse to be comfortable being groomed in cross ties, he has to be absolutely confident that this is a comfort place. When I'm here, I can relax. I have no other responsibilities other than to just stand here and chill. And then you can use the cross ties and have it be and have comfortable grooming and bonding time. I
Yeah.
think
I
anything.
just real quick on the clipper note, because I don't know that we'll have a lot of time to cover that, but I just wanted, I'm assuming most of our listeners will know that the FBI made it not legal to clip your chin whiskers. But I remember, and I just mentioned that because I think it's a really cool evolution, because not that long ago, it was considered good grooming and turnout to really clip those whiskers off your horse and present a really sharp, clean looking horse to the judge. And as our knowledge expands, we realize, oh, there's actually nerve endings in those whiskers. They give the horse a lot of sensory data. Maybe we shouldn't be cutting them. And so to reach all the way to making it illegal is it's pretty compelling. And why another reason I wanted to have this conversation to just keep furthering our thoughts about this.
Oh, I think that's a really good point. And if you look closely, if you've got a large enough picture here, this is Abby again, and her little whiskers show up a bit against the white trim on the stall door.
Yeah.
And there's your point. That's what's on the end of her nose where she can't see, and that's what tells her when she's got her face or her nose really close to something. These whiskers, as you said, serve a very important purpose, and cutting them off really is a very bad thing to do for the horses. And then, like you said, when I was young, that was it. That was part of, oh, your horse should be neat and tidy. And then along with that same point, we have mane pulling. There's a neat, tidy Hanoverian,
Mm-hmm.
and there's her mane nice and short. This happens to be my sister and her horse Gracie. My sister stopped pulling mane 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when she was pulling the mane of a gray horse and saw drops of blood.
Oh,
And
wow.
she said, I don't care what the show expects. I'm not doing this anymore. So she has found tools that you can use to trim manes. So although Gracie's mane may look like it's been pulled, it's actually been trimmed with a special type of tool that just makes it look neat and tidy. So to your point, we need to be careful that we're not doing things that are detrimental or against good welfare.
Yeah, and I think sometimes there's just this humanization, anthropomorphizing, to go back to assuming that horses really want to get the mud clods off their butt, or they really want to have a tail that's docked square, or they don't wake up and look in the mirror and think those things. They don't go, gosh, I just really wish my hair were really silky and combed out straight right now. That's really, it's really us projecting. And I think
Totally.
we need to move past this. I'm not certainly not advocating, like, don't touch your horse. I'm a huge fan of, putting your hands on your horse, but I am saying we need to move past equating like glossy, shiny, well-brushed horses with well cared for horses, because there's not always a causation there. So anyway, my soapbox.
Yeah, well, and I agree with you. And interestingly, I can tell you what my horse does the absolute first thing after I give him a bath. He
You
has to
roll.
go out and roll.
Yeah.
And and the muddier the ground is, the better from his perspective. He calls it the spin dry cycle. And pretty much everything we're talking about also applies to bathing a horse. Horses have individual preferences. So this is Bronze. For years, he danced around anytime I gave him a bath. I'm dancing. Both of us would end up completely soggy and completely out of sorts with each other until I realized he just can't stand cold water on his back. He expects his back to be cleaned with warm water. So I got a bucket and a sponge and I put warm water on his back. Then he's happy. My sister's horse wanted her bath water, wanted her shower water about the same temperature that I like mine. Really, really warm. You'd think it was too hot, but that's what made her happy. If you have that option, I don't. But to show how individual they are, this is Shiloh. I am spraying her udder with ice cold water. She's happy.
Yeah.
As you can see, she's got nothing on. She's just standing there, and the lip is starting to go. The ears are turned back towards me, but the lip is starting to go because she's happy.
I can see her lips.
So we really need to watch. Yeah, we need to watch and see what is it that matters to them, so that we're and that's what builds the bond. Horses need to feel listened to, and this is a good time. Grooming time is a good time that we can show them that we're listening.
And just to go back to when I was earlier mentioning the sequence or the schedule of things, I think sometimes if you're listening to maybe you come out on a weekend, you're really busy, you don't have much time, and you're going to think, I'm just going to decompress and groom my horse for 20 minutes, spend some time bonding with them. But if you bring them out and they're kind of unsettled and dancing around, I think sometimes your time with that horse is better served, maybe taking him for a walk, getting them some exercise, let them move their feet around. As much as it might decompress you to spend some time just meditatively grooming, I think we need to pay attention, which is the theme here, pay attention. And some days are better served by saying, you know what, you are covered in dust and you've got maybe a thistle in your tail, but screw it. You're telling me that maybe you need to move and roll and maybe buck once and fart across the arena and get your yayas out. And then maybe we'll go for a walk down the road. And that's going to be how we spend our 20 minutes today. And to be honest, I think that in terms of bonding, I think that that's going to be more productive on a given day.
I agree. There's something very bonding about going for a walk together. Think about it. Friends, we often build friendships by doing things together with somebody, by having a mutual interest. So what you mentioned there, going for a walk, allowing the horse to move as he wants to move, can be really helpful. And going out exploring is hugely bonding. Go out and this is not a march down the road with like an obedience dog walk. This is let's stroll around, see what there's new that we want to look at, and explore things together, and just let the horse look at what he wants to look at, and then move on when he's ready to move on, because that's giving him choices too. Bonding or exploring is the core emotion seeking, which is a hugely beneficial one that creates lots of good brain chemicals. So that can be way more bonding than touching that he's not excited about having.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when horses are fussy about being groomed, because I had a blog on this and a post a while back, and a lot of people responded, and a lot of people said, what about horses who, no matter what you do, no matter how carefully you listen, no matter what tool you use, they just don't want to be touched. They just act like touch is just too annoying. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people brought up some ideas about what that can mean. With some horses, they're just innately more sensitive, and people particularly mentioned thoroughbreds and thoroughbred types who may have less hair even to cushion the application of grooming tools. They may have pressure points that are sore. They can have medical issues. A horse who doesn't want to be groomed may turn out to have ulcers or insulin resistance, Cushing's, Lyme, even a vitamin E deficiency. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of medical conditions that can contribute to a horse looking like, I don't want to be groomed. And you're saying, why? I've tried every brush in the barn, every jury in the barn, and you're still saying you're not happy with it. No, it's possible that there's something else going on. Somebody, and mares, of course, um, can be touchier at certain times in their cycle. And
Yeah, I'm glad you're
and
bringing this. Zoom is telling us we only have 10 minutes left, FYI, as of right now. But I am glad you're bringing this up, Lynn, because I want to make sure we covered it, because certainly there are some horses where you've ruled out the stressors, right? They tie up just fine. They don't seem to be exhibiting any anxiety or tension. You've spent a long time trying out different touches, and they just don't ever seem to just dig it, like some horses do, with the total relaxed body posture, the rubbery lips, the doe eye, you never get that. And I know back in the day we had an expression they would say they were tight skinned, some of these horses, which is just a way of saying what you just expressed. They might have sore spots or ulcers, or the fascia may be more or less dehydrated. Who's to say? But they can be sometimes disappointing or frustrating for owners, because you want to groom them, or at least touch them with your hands and work out the tight spots. So carrying on with that, Lynn, maybe you can continue your thought in this area.
well, I noticed with Bronze, he was grumpy about being groomed long before I discovered that he was insulin resistant. And once we started to address the insulin resistance, he got more comfortable being groomed. But there are days he just doesn't really feel like being groomed. I mean, that's just sort of the impression I get.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see that, sometimes, and this is Bronze's thing, now Shiloh wouldn't like this in particular, but sometimes if I just take my fingertips and very lightly run my fingertips over his body, he gets all relaxed and dozy and apparently really enjoys that touch. And I can enjoy that touch too. We're still having that touch, but it's a bonding touch because he's happy with it and it feels good to me. Um, and you never know. If some people have suggested that static electricity, even at a very low level, might
Mm,
really bother some horses.
yeah. Hmm.
So part of it is we really need to trust them. If they're saying they're not comfortable with something, then we need to trust that they're really not comfortable. Um, it's important to see that their behavior is communication. It's not disobedience or disrespect. How else do they have to tell you they don't like the brush you're using? Turn around and give you a dirty look. But if you
Yeah.
scold them for that, then they shut up and then they just get more tense as they just put up with whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. They're all so different. I think we have time to cover the last. Do you have a couple more slides there? So it's telling us we have about 7 minutes left. It looks like you had a couple photos left.
I think we've pretty much looked at them all. This was Bronze, who is very happy about baths as long as the warm water goes on his back.
Mm-hmm.
And there's oops, I don't know how we ended up with two at the same time, but there we go. And that's Abby with her little whiskers,
Mm-hmm.
reminding us not to trim those cute little whiskers off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another one of those, let's not pull the manes. I think that's going out of fashion though, isn't it?
I,
Or is it?
I think little by little it is definitely, certainly is. And I think maybe following close behind that'll be certain types of braiding that pulls on the hair really tight. So it's cool to see this stuff change, because as many things that you and I talk about, a lot of the horse world is steeped in tradition, and I love tradition, but sometimes there's thinking that needs to shift. And I think some of these principles are just that.
Yes. Well, I think the horse world really is very much bound in tradition. And as you say, some of those traditions are good. But one of the problems with tradition is that we tend to do it that way because it's always been done that way, because it's always been done that way. And people haven't stopped to think, is there a good reason for this? And I think that applies to a lot of things that we do with horses. And if we stop and look at things from the horse's point of view and say, well, how does the horse feel about this? and practice putting yourself in the horse's position. Interestingly, and because this goes back 50 years, Colonel Podolsky said that when he was working with horses, he was always trying to put himself in the horse's position and imagine how the horse was feeling. And some people like to belittle that by calling it anthropomorphism. But there's a difference between empathy and anthropomorphism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm being anthropomorphic if I say, well, I'm cold outside, therefore my horse needs a blanket.
Mm-hmm.
That's anthropomorphic. I'm assuming that he's cold because I'm cold. But empathy is to look at a horse who's dancing around in cross ties and say, looks like he's pretty uncomfortable and feeling unsafe, being restricted like that, for example.
Yeah, maybe whinnying for his buddy, or it's, feeding time and he has, anxiety because he's only fed twice a day, which is sort of an unnatural way to do it. So I mean, it could be any number of things, but and again, it is very individual. But so worthwhile, because I think we've covered a lot that's useful for all of us to remember, is just how you're going about your grooming. What is your setup? I know I was speaking with a vet once who said many horses behave so poorly for their x-rays in the field because you bring them from their outdoor life in the paddock. A lot of times when you bring them into the space, it's really poorly lit and it's all shadowy, and you're asking them to stand in this area that maybe they don't normally stand in, over near the tack room where the outlet is that they need to run the radiography machine. There's all
Yeah.
these stressors, and sometimes it's similar with grooming. You're gonna plug your clippers into this outlet and stand your horse somewhere they don't normally stand, and maybe his pasture mate's budding. There's just a lot of triggers that get stacked up.
Yeah. Yeah, there definitely are, and that's I know we're just about out of time, but that's another really important point in favor of preparing horses ahead of time for things that they might need to be able to do.
And giving yourself the permission that if you're in one of these moments, you might be more productive to go play a game with your horse in the arena, take him for a walk, to have a short hack and maybe revisit it. But there might be another activity you can do before you revisit the grooming. Because it's funny, because the things we call grooming,
Yes.
horses do it to each other in the field. It doesn't commonly mirror what we do with them. Like, my geldings, they sidle up next to each other and they kind of scratch each other's withers, or the poll, but they don't spend a lot of time like rubbing the rib cage or the loin or places like if a horse is ulcery or saddle sore, that it's going to be reactive. But these are the areas we run our brushes across a lot, and the tail will swish and we'll be like, well, hang on, I got to get this dirt out. Those aren't the regions that horses groom each other, like the chest and pectorals. Like,
If you
no.
think about how horses start a mutual grooming session, it starts very gently.
Mhm.
Next to each other. Are you interested? A little nuzzle. How about this? And then they can shift around and show each other where they want to be groomed. So the horses are very active participants. If we can help our horses be more active as participants in the grooming, show us what they want and tune into that, then I think that we can make that into a more of a bonding time.
Well, perfect. Perfect place to wrap up. And thanks as always, Lynn. We'll post this video afterwards, and in the show notes of the YouTube video will be the link to Lynn's article. So definitely check that out and send in any questions you have. We'll catch you in a future episode, Lynn. Thanks.
Thank you. So long.